I still remember the first time I stumbled over it. This tension inside me, like two worlds colliding in my heart. I was reading the Bible late one night, praying for clarity, when I came across a verse that froze me cold. On one page, God is pouring out forgiveness, healing the broken, comforting the grieving. And on the next, he's calling for cities to be destroyed, armies to be wiped out, with parents and children, everything in sight. I looked up from the page and whispered, "Is this the same God?" And just like that, something shifted. That night, I felt the ground beneath my faith crack. I kept reading, but every sentence felt like a question in disguise, an invitation to dig deeper. It was as if the Spirit itself was saying, "Hold on, don't let go." This wasn't just about curiosity. I was comfortable in church, raised on the whole salvation story, learning to trust Jesus. But here was the truth everyone shied away from. The God of wrath in the Old Testament didn't seem to match the God of love Jesus described. I felt a sweet unease settling in, something powerful telling me, this matter is deeper than you think. So I dove into early church history, and what I found shocked me. Not just a few alternative writings, but entire communities, hidden truths, accounts of followers who believed Yahweh wasn't even the true God he claimed to be. The Gnostics, they spoke of a false deity, a lower, flawed demiurge, who built our world as a prison, not a paradise. And the real God? He was hidden, transcendent, pulsing with light and truth, not demands and wrath. That understanding was like a door swinging open in my soul. It explained that silent unrest in my heart. It made the stories of miracles and love from Jesus all the more urgent. It felt like stepping off a cliff and into his arms. Before we go further, if this resonates with your spirit, I want to invite you to subscribe, hit the bell, because I believe God's unspoken revelations are meant to reach you now. In the Old Testament, we read about floods, plagues, conquest, and yes, judgment. But in Jesus' life, we see healing, forgiveness, grace pouring out even on the worst sinners. The tension is real. If that scares you or frustrates you, you're not alone. I felt it too, but I learned something that healed me. These weren't contradictions. They were clues. The clues pointed to a greater story, one of deception so old it reached to the throne of heaven itself, and of a Messiah who came not just to die, but to wake us up, to align us with the true God beyond the false rulers cloaked in divine robes. Tonight, we begin that journey together. It's a story of battle, spiritual, personal, eternal. It's wilder than you imagined, but what I found in the end wasn't fear. It was hope. It was knowing that the Father I know in Jesus is far purer, far deeper, sweeter than any doctrine I was taught. And he's calling you to deeper too. You're not here by accident. I kept searching. I couldn't stop. Something inside me had been shaken. I'd always believed what I was told in church, that the God of the Bible, the one who destroyed cities and the one who gave his only son, were the same being. But the more I looked, the more I started to feel like something was off. I stumbled across something I had never heard in any Sunday sermon: the Gnostics. Early Christians who believed that Yahweh, the God of the Old Testament, wasn't the ultimate God at all, but a lesser being, a fraud, a jailer of souls. It felt insane at first, blasphemous. But when I opened their texts, the Gospel of Thomas, the secret book of John, it didn't feel like heresy. It felt like truth I had always known, deep down, but had never been allowed to say. And then came the most chilling realization. They were silenced. The Gnostics, the Catholic Christians in France, the ones who believed in a God of pure light beyond Yahweh, they were hunted, murdered, their books burned, their names erased. If this was all just conspiracy, why go to such lengths to bury it? Subscribe to the channel if you're feeling what I'm saying, because we're not done. Not even close. What I discovered next turned everything upside down. It wasn't just that the church ignored these other views. They actively rewrote history. In 325 AD, Emperor Constantine gathered bishops and leaders at the Council of Nicaea. Most people think this was a holy meeting guided by the Spirit, but what it really was politics. The Roman Empire was falling apart. Constantine needed unity, and religion was the tool. So they created a unified version of Christianity: one God, one canon, one truth. And anything that didn't fit that mold, gone, banned, destroyed. Do you know how many gospels we lost that day? Ever heard of the Gospel of Mary Magdalene? It paints her not as a prostitute, but as one of Jesus's most trusted disciples, a spiritual equal, maybe even more. But it was thrown out. Why? Because it gave too much voice to a woman, because it didn't serve the patriarchy. What about the Gospel of Judas? In it, Jesus laughs at the disciples for worshiping the wrong God, the wrong God. Let that sink in. What if Jesus knew? What if he came not just to save us from sin, but to awaken us to a deeper truth? That the God of fear, the God of control, was not the true God at all. It wasn't until I read the Gospel of Philip that the pieces began to fit. It said, "Ignorance is the mother of all evil, and those things which are because of it spring from it." Could that be it? Could the real sin be not rebellion, but blind obedience? Have we been worshiping out of fear instead of truth? I looked back at the Old Testament. Fire, flood, war, wrath, entire nations slaughtered, infants killed, people commanded to stone each other to death. Does that sound like the Father Jesus spoke of? Because the Jesus I know said, "Love your enemies, do good to those who hate you." He healed, he forgave, he called God Abba, Father. And something inside me started whispering, maybe we've been lied to. If you're starting to feel that stir in your soul, don't ignore it. Subscribe, follow, come back. We're just uncovering what's been buried for centuries. Now, I want you to imagine this. There are millions of believers today who worship with full hearts, not knowing that the image of God they hold might be a mask, a fusion, a political creation. And when they pray, they might not even be praying to the God Jesus spoke of. That terrified me, because it meant I might have been doing the same. But then came a moment, a revelation that shook me. One night I was reading Genesis, the garden, Adam and Eve, the serpent. And suddenly the question hit me. What exactly did the serpent do that was so wrong? He offered them knowledge. He said, "If you eat this, your eyes will be opened." And they were. They didn't die. Their eyes were opened. They saw, they understood, and Yahweh got angry. Why? Because they knew. Because they no longer obeyed blindly. That's when it clicked. The serpent wasn't evil. He was the light bringer, the revealer. He didn't enslave them, he freed them. Could it be that the serpent wasn't the villain, but the liberator? And if that's true, then what else have they lied about? I sat there frozen. The serpent, Lucifer, had always been painted as the villain, the deceiver, the enemy of God. But if he had offered knowledge, awareness, awakening, then was he really evil? Or was that just what we were told? I couldn't sleep that night. My mind kept racing. Because if the serpent was the one who opened our eyes, then what exactly was God trying to keep us from seeing? That was when I found the Gnostic writings again. This time I read them with new eyes. In their teachings, Yahweh, the angry God of the Old Testament, was not the true creator, but the demiurge, a lesser God, a jealous being born from Sophia, divine wisdom, but cut off from the source of light. They said he was a false God, pretending to be the only God, creating a material world to trap souls, using fear, obedience, and punishment to keep us blind to the truth. And that explained everything. It explained why the Old Testament God demanded blood and sacrifice. It explained why he punished curiosity and independence. It explained why Jesus never referred to Yahweh directly, not once by that name. Jesus spoke of a Father in heaven, one of light, love, and truth, a God who desires mercy, not sacrifice. Could it be that Jesus wasn't serving the Old Testament God, but opposing him? My heart was pounding. It all felt insane, sacrilegious. But it also felt right, like I was finally breaking through something dark, something buried for centuries. I remember looking up at the ceiling, whispering, "Jesus, who were you really, and what were you really trying to free us from?" And that's when it hit me like thunder. Jesus wasn't crucified because he was just a threat to Rome. He was crucified because he was a threat to every system of control, religious, political, and spiritual. He came to expose the lie, to open the eyes of the blind, to tear the veil, to show us that God is within. And that terrified the ones who built their empires on fear. Because once people realize that the divine is not locked in a temple, not confined to a book, not filtered through a priesthood, they can't be controlled anymore. That's why the real teachings and real teachings of Jesus were edited, diluted, and hidden. That's why the Gnostic Gospels were burned. That's why the Council of Nicaea made sure only certain truths survived. They told us Yahweh was the Father of Jesus, but Jesus never said that. They told us Lucifer was the devil, but what if he was simply the challenger of tyranny? They told us obedience was godliness, but Jesus called the Pharisees blind guides and flipped their tables. They lied. They lied about the Bible's God for over 2,000 years. And millions of us have worshipped out of fear, thinking we were honoring the Father when we were honoring a mask. Look, I'm not here to tell you what to believe. I'm not here to destroy anyone's faith. In fact, this journey brought me closer to Jesus than I've ever been. But not the Jesus they talk about on TV. The real Jesus, the rebel, the liberator, the teacher of hidden wisdom, the Jesus who said, "The King of God is within you." If you felt it too, if deep down you've always sensed something wasn't right, then maybe this is your confirmation. Maybe you're not crazy. Maybe you're waking up. And if you are, you're not alone. There are millions of us all over the world, peeling back the layers of doctrine, questioning what we were told, searching, not for religion, but for the truth. So don't stop. Don't let fear keep you from the path, and don't let them shame you for asking the hard questions, because those questions might just lead you to the real God, the one who doesn't demand blind obedience, but offers divine partnership, the one who isn't hiding behind fire and brimstone, but waiting within your own soul. So if this spoke to something in you, if you feel something burning in your chest right now, if your heart is whispering, "Yes, I've always known this was true," then I invite you right now to subscribe, not just to this channel, but to the truth, to the awakening, to the journey of unlearning and rediscovering the God Jesus really came to reveal. Not the God of wrath, not the God of chains, but the God of light. The God who never needed blood to love you. The God who never cursed your curiosity. The God who has been calling you, not to obedience, but to freedom. Because the truth is, they lied about the Bible's God for over 2,000 years, but now we're remembering, we're rising, and we're reclaiming the truth. Welcome home.